Good afternoon. My name is Don Collins. I currently live in Swanton, Vermont. I've been there for the last 26 years. Wonderful community. The project I'm undertaking today started out as a small idea, but thanks to the support and cooperation of Josh and the people at Public Access Television, is developing into something that's taken on a life of its own. Hopefully it won't be too embarrassing to my family and friends, but it's something I've been thinking about for the last 2 or 3 years. You look at a bucket list and things you'd like to do while you're still active and able to do them. And one of them was to make some type of recording for my grandchildren. Also my children. Some of the things that I'm going to say today they're probably not aware of. And if I'm lucky enough to have great-grandchildren and beyond, maybe they'll enjoy it. The idea came about working with my grandchildren, playing with my grandchildren, and every once in a while they'd say, "Grandpa, we didn't know you did that." I remember one time I spoke to one of my grandsons, excuse me, who was doing something inappropriate, and I said, if I was your principal, I would keep you after school with me. And he goes, "Grandpa, you were a principal?" And so there's a lot of those little discussions that I thought, it's not a big deal, but maybe they would at some point enjoy knowing that. Then I tried to think of things that tied each other together. And I think talking with Josh, this is what I came up with, that hard work, or work in general, but work never killed anyone. And when did I first hear that? I probably first heard it when I was a teenager, living on a farm. And because we didn't have a hired man or a hired woman in the place, my dad, many times, I was a farmhand. And I did things that probably, at my age, were challenging, but they needed to be done. And I remember one time when there was something I wanted to do besides work, I made mention of it to my dad. And my dad said, work never killed anybody. That's kind of interesting. A few times when we were doing really hard jobs, like in the woods cutting timber and stuff, and it was hard work with the horses, and I'd say, wow, this is going to be a tough job. This is going to be a hard job. And again, my dad would say, hard work never killed anybody. So I thought of that in my teenage years and thought about it occasionally. But it really came to light when I was talking to my oldest granddaughter, who had a job while she was in middle school, caring for a child who needed someone to meet her at the bus, take her home, make sure everything was safe, feed her a snack, and do quite a few other things. Sometimes she did the dishes, sometimes she did the laundry. And we were talking, and I was telling her how proud I was of her. She says, Grandpa, I enjoy it, but it's hard work. And so I said to Addison, Addison, hard work never killed anybody. And that's what my dad told me. So my life's kind of broken into, I guess I'd say, sections, years that kind of were grouped together. But I want to get back to this hard work never killed anyone. When I was thinking about it, I thought, I wonder where that came from. And I guess you could find a number of sources where somebody said they used that statement. But the one I liked the most was, and for many of you people, you probably don't remember Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, but I do. I remember hearing them on the radio. I remember seeing them on TV. So in one program, Edgar says to Charlie, "Spring is coming, Charlie. We need to do spring cleaning. And that's not just cleaning here in the house. We need to go out on the grounds. There are leaves, there's brush, there's stuff out there, trash. We really need to do that. And we need to get on it and do great work." And Charlie says, "That sounds like awfully hard work." To which Edgar Bergen said, "Charlie, hard work never killed anybody." And Charlie McCarthy's response was, "Well, I don't want to be the first casualty." And so I said to myself, I thought, I wish I'd said to my dad, "Hey, Dad, it's Saturday night and I have things I want to do. I'm a teenager." And tell him that I didn't want to be the first casualty. So I'm going to break my presentation down, as I say, into sections, pretty much by age and how they kind of one follow the other. I will say I grew up in a family where you were expected to work, you were encouraged to take risks, and pretty much made you feel like you could do about anything if you put your mind to it. So I'm going to start with my first job, and don't laugh about this, but it is the truth. My first paying job, I was 5 years old. Wow, 5 years old and he has a job. And this job and the topic I'm going to talk about briefly, it's kind of stayed with my life for, 20 years or more. My dad, whose name was Elroy Collins, but everybody called him Tom Collins, was known as the Christmas tree king in the Northeast Kingdom. Now, back then, there were very few, if any, tree farms, but Christmas trees were called pasture trees. And my dad had a relationship with farmers where he would go around in the summertime after we got our haying done and talk with the farmers about this is a year that there should be some pretty good trees ready to be harvested on your farm. My dad liked to do 3-year cycles. Sometimes a farmer would call and say, I need some money. We'd do a 2-year cycle. Sometimes my dad would say, if you'd wait another year, I think we may get better trees because maybe there was too much sun and there was burn on some of the branches. But anyway, so my job at 5 years old was to take to the local post office either an envelope that would have information inside or a postal card. Not a postcard, but a postal card that was stamped and pretty empty with anything on it. And what my dad had to do every day is report to the contractor we worked for, who was in Portland, Maine, on how many trees he had cut, how many were spruce, which was kind of a secondary tree for us, or how many were for balsam fir. And he had to show what sizes they were. The smallest tree was a table tree. A table tree might not have gotten more than a yard tall, and the tallest ones were church trees. We didn't cut many church trees. They were almost special order. We'd get a call from Portland, or my dad would, I have an order for 20 church trees. And so we'd make sure that we found 20 church trees over the next few weeks. The table trees, oftentimes we left them there thinking give them 6 years, 3 years, they'll be more valuable. But sometimes the table trees, and cows were the enemies of pasture trees. A little tree would get stepped on by a cow, it would bend the stalk, and so my dad would say, this tree is not really going to grow up to be a valuable tree, so let's cut it. So my job, I'd go to the post office. I think the post office, I would guess, was maybe 10-minute walk. My mom could see me most of the time walking from our house until I got up on the sidewalk. Sometimes she'd go with me. Sometimes she'd walk part way and talk with a neighbor. But I would go in the post office, and usually I needed a stamp, but sometimes I didn't need one, but I bought one. Some 3-cent stamps, once in a while 1-cent stamps. But the money from my nickel was mine. And I was kind of torn at times because Mr. Narmore, who ran the store, was a really great guy. And I used to go over there and slap a penny on the counter and say, Mr. Narmore, I want a peppermint stick. How about a Tootsie Roll today? Might name 2 or 3 things. And he'd say, yeah, that penny, that'll do it. And sometimes he'd say to me, I think you're up to about 2 cents today. So that's kind of how we went on. And I started at age 5, and I did that pretty much until we moved to the farm when I was 9. It got easier as I got older. The rate of pay never changed, but it was kind of fun to do. And as I got older and went in the woods with my dad, when I was probably 7 or 8, it was kind of neat to keep track of the trees. How many balsam fir size 6 did we do, and go from there. So we worked with the Christmas trees. I had a pretty normal childhood. I remember a neighbor lady who didn't have children taught me my ABCs, and I would say to her, this is hard, Caddy. This is hard, Caddy. And she'd say, it's all right. It's going to help you later. It's going to make you smart, she used to say. My mom used to take me to the library. Uh, my grandfather was a road commissioner, and so I had a pretty good life. I could get on the gravel truck with my uncle and ride around much of the day. And then sometimes they'd let me sit on the bulldozer. Never took photos because we didn't have a camera. We just let you do it and enjoy it. I was 5 years old, as I say. I was starting school. My birthday was in November, so I started in September. And I'll never forget, it was just before Labor Day, and my mother said, we need to go shopping. Oh, yeah, it's all right. I like to shop. So we went to Newport, and she started picking out clothes. And I'm thinking, why do I need clothes? I have plenty of clothes. I have some jeans. I have clothes. I play in the dirt. I pile wood. I do things around home. So my mom picked out a couple little shirts, said, oh, this will be a nice one. New pair of pants, 2 pairs, I think, and some shoes. So I said, Mom, why are we shopping? And it hit me like a bolt of lightning. You are going to school. I'm what? You're going to school. And I'd heard that because there used to be high school students walking by my house in the village, and they'd say, are you in school? When are you going to school? And when we'd go sometimes up by the grocery store, the IGA, up the hill, there was this big building. And there was a church and a cemetery and a school. And I didn't think much about it. I saw kids there, and I didn't quite relate that I might have to go there someday and stay all day. And boy, that really kind of floored me because any day I wanted to ride the gravel truck or go with my dad, working on his other jobs, whatever, I was pretty free to do it. Play with the other neighborhood kids. Off to school I went, got there, wonderful teacher. We were in one room, first and second grade. And it was pretty amazing, the things she did. And I think there must have been close to 25 students there. Some of them were loud and noisy. Some of them were very quiet. And I kind of looked around and thought, what did I just buy into? But hey, my mother said I had to do it, so I did it. And my dad encouraged me too. He said, there'll be plenty of time on weekends to work and do things that you want to do. I tried it for a while, and I didn't particularly like it. I liked what they called arithmetic. Actually, I went on to become a teacher of mathematics. It seemed like I think we started at 9 in the morning, but it might have been 8:30. And at noontime, we had a noon hour, and we did have an actual hour. And the people in the village, like me, could go home to lunch, particularly during good weather and early school year, so September. So I went to school in the morning, and I'd go home to lunch. And then I figured, I've had enough of this. So I would go halfway to school, and there was a parish hall, and behind the parish hall, there was a gravel pit. So I found a way to get some of my trucks and toys that I played with in gravel and dirt and took them with me. And for probably 2 or 3 weeks or more, I'd pick 1 or 2 days a week, and I wouldn't go back to school in the afternoon. And school was getting better. I was learning things, and I liked that, but I didn't like being there all day. So things were going pretty well until they had something called a PTA meeting. And my mother went to the PTA meeting, and I think she got to be an officer. But anyway, whatever it was, she was kind of into the PTA. And apparently, after the PTA meeting, the teacher said to my mother, so how is little Donald enjoying school? And my mother says, oh, I think he likes it. And the teacher says, well, I think so too, but I'm really concerned that he gets tired and can't come back in the afternoon. Well, I don't think my mother ran home, but when she came home, she said something about the teacher was very nice and she met some other parents. And she said, but the teacher's concerned because you don't come back to school in the afternoon. Well, I'll tell you, she was very kind, but I never pulled that trick again. So I guess you could say I quit school in the first grade, and I'm now 82, and every year in between I've either studied, worked in the school business, or did consulting in the school business, or serving in my 20th year on the local school board. So I guess that I learned my lesson early and learned that school education is really very, very important. In 1952, my dad came home and said, we are moving. Well, I'd only known this one house. We'd moved there when I was quite young. But it sounded exciting, and it did become exciting. I loved the farm. I loved the farm. I could have a dog. We had cats. I had rabbits, raised calves. Everything kind of revolved around the farm. I joined 4-H, showed cattle. When I went to high school, I joined FFA. I really liked working on the farm. I didn't see it as hard work at all. But the other thing I liked, going back to my nickel-a-day job, was a great chance on a farm to make money. I remember my dad, who was big into gardens, saying, you know, you could have your own little garden if you wanted to. We had a house garden for the beets, string beans, carrots, things like that. And then we had a farm garden where my dad usually grew corn, and I think must have had a couple different spots because we had pumpkins and squash. So I thought, you know, I think I'd like to raise something and maybe make some money. And so I decided on squash. And being on a farm, you certainly had plenty of manure and other things you needed and water. And I had quite a good squash crop. And I remember going to Mr. Narmore at the store and telling him I had a lot of squash, would he like to buy some? And that started my career in raising and selling squash. Did that for a few years. Also did a lot of other things on the farm that I enjoyed. I loved horses. My grandfather had bought me my first pony when I was 6 years old. And we didn't take the pony on the farm. My dad said, a pony is good, but better be left with your grandfather where the other horses are and not be here alone. But as time went on, my dad bought a riding horse for me, and we had work horses. And so I guess I would say of all the animals on the farm, my number one was horses, my number two was pigs. The rest of them I could enjoy, although I shouldn't say that because my dog was probably my favorite. But I enjoyed the farm life and thought, you know, someday I may want to be a farmer. But things changed and decided I didn't want to be a farmer. But when I was 14, I remember a gentleman, neighbor, coming to our barn, and I heard him talking with my dad, and I was off doing calf work with calves and things, and heard the man say that he had an opportunity to go to up in Jay. They were building a ski area in Jay Peak, and he had a little bulldozer, little Caterpillar, and he had a dump truck, and he could make more money working up there in the summer, in the weather like from, I guess, May to October, than he certainly could farming. And what he was looking for was somebody to milk his cows. And if I remember right, I think we had about 20 cows. And what I had to do was go down in the morning. We usually went to work about 4 o'clock. Sometimes we got a little late, but pretty much the cows were on a schedule. So we'd go and we'd get them out of the night pasture, night field, and we'd bring them in, and we'd feed them. Sometimes some of them needed attention otherwise, but the main job was to milk the cows and put the milk in the coolers, clean the barn. Once you've turned the cattle out to the day pasture from the night pasture, and clean up, and then go back to the house, our farm, and do some chores there. I was 14 years old, and I was making $15 a week, and I decided that I really did like farming. Well, the next year, another farmer who had seen me there came to the house in the spring and said he'd like to hire me because he had a chance to work on a carpentry project. So I think for probably 3 summers, maybe 4, but 3 anyway, I did milking of cows for small farmers. I think as I look at my life, I think I was lucky. I think I was fortunate to have people who supported me. And I think I was kind of brave at times and was willing to try things that maybe some of my friends that I played ball with and stuff wouldn't do. But I remember my uncle calling my house. I was 16 years old that summer, so I had a license and an old bang-up car. And he said, I just sold a building lot to a fellow, and the carpenters came over and looked at it. And in the conversation, they said, you know, what we'd really like to find is some young person here who would like to do a little carpentry, make a little money, and learn some skills. And so my uncle recommended me. And that summer, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents living there and working as a carpenter. And the 2 gentlemen that hired me were great men, very good carpenters, very good finished carpenters. And I was kind of the grunt on the job. I remember digging a ditch so we could bring in power line down under rather than up above. Oh, just about anything that needed to be done that didn't take a lot of skill. That was my job. And it was going quite well, and I liked it. And then one day when I came to work, Mr. Gardner said, Donald, we're going to take a few minutes. I want to have you go over here. I want to show you something. So I did, and there was all these long strips of molding on sawhorses and a couple of paintbrushes and some pails of paint. And he says, you ever paint? And I said, well, I'll paint a little bit at home, but I'm not very good at it. And he says, well, I think you can be good at it. And maybe you heard some discussions the last few days, but I've had enough. I'm firing the painter. He comes late, he leaves early, he's messy, and he's gone. So I started becoming a painter. To this day, I'm not sure I like painting. But anyway, that summer, I did a lot of painting of trim, and pretty much what I did was I did the primer and I did the first coat. I think somebody else many times put another coat on it, but not always. So when I worked there, and at the end of the summer, they said, see you next year. And I said, yes, I will. And at Christmas time, I remember getting a card saying, we're looking forward to seeing you. But when they told me where they were working, it was too far for me to drive. In the beginning, they were coming from Newport south, and the new job was Newport northeast. But word got out, and I think they had something to do with this. A carpenter stopped by the house, and I heard him talking with my dad, and my father hollered to me, and this guy said, I'm building a house this summer, and I need someone to work with us. Are you interested? So I had a second summer helping build a new house. One of the interesting things was that I remember someone coming from the building supply, I think it was Prouty and Miller, and they had a new material. It was called aluminum siding, and they were looking for places who would take aluminum siding and try it, and they would give them a good deal. They were going to promote it. And then if it looked good and worked good, they'd ask people to come and look at the job. Well, there were quite a few naysayers and laughers, chucklers that said, it'll never work. Well, it did. And I think about 50 years later, I bought a rental property, and it had aluminum siding on it. So I guess aluminum siding was a good deal. Going back to networking, while I was working as a carpenter, the manager of the Kraft Food cheese plant was the owner, and he'd come by and he would talk with the carpenters, and sometimes he'd say hi to me, and sometimes he didn't say anything. He'd just come in and talk with the boss. Well, one day he said to me, how old are you? I said, well, I'm 16. He says, well, when you're 18, come to the cheese plant and you'll have a job. So I thought, sure, I'm sure I'm going to the cheese plant. Well, after doing carpentry for 2 summers, I just thought, I think I'm going to go to the cheese plant and see what's going on. And Mr. Lemna went in, and he remembered me, and he says, I want you to sit here a few minutes. He went and got a fellow. The guy's name was Harry Niles, and Harry and I became very good friends. So I went to making cheese. Some of the best cheese in America was made right in Troy, Vermont. And I worked weekends. I worked all summer. And at that point, I was getting ready to head to college. And so on weekends, I would come in and work. Harry and I became good friends because he was very good to me, and I was very good to Harry. I remember more than one Saturday night coming home from dancing, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, going to bed. About an hour later, the phone would ring. My mother would holler, "Donald, it's Harry." I'd go downstairs, Harry would say, "So-and-so hasn't come in. I'm doing his work right now, but how soon can you get here?" And so I would take and get ready. My mother would pack my lunch. I think sometimes she had already packed. And I would go to the cheese factory. And many times Harry would say to me, "Look, just want you to know I appreciate you coming in, and you're getting time and a half tonight." And sometimes he would come to me near the end of my shift and saying, "George went on a bender, and he's not coming in today. Can you give me another 4 hours?" And he always rewarded me financially and always said good things about me. So I did the cheese business for a while, a few years. I got a chance. United Farmers used to pipe the milk over in stainless steel pipes. So I had to go back and forth sometimes from Kraft Foods to United Farmers. And my uncle worked over there and introduced me to the plant manager, who said, "If you ever get sick of making cheese, come over here because I'll hire you to work here." So I thought, well, maybe I'll do that. So I took a summer job elsewhere, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But I decided I'd go to United Farmers on weekends because a lot of the regular help like the Saturday and or Sunday off. And guess what? One of my jobs was to climb inside of bulk tanks. We were just switching over. Quite a few farms by then. I think most of them had gone from milk cans to bulk tanks. And I would take my hose, climb up the ladder side of the truck, slither down into the bottom, taking myself down on the ladder inside, and rinse out the trucks as much as I could. Get the water flowing out, and of course the truckers were there, and they loved that because it was their job to keep their trucks clean. And then I'd crawl back out, take my hose, and lay on my stomach and rinse the truck floor that I couldn't get while I was standing there. So that was quite an interesting job. And then I got to do a number of other jobs there. And those people stayed in my life at United Farmers for quite a few years. Even, I guess, after I was married, they would contact me, and I was teaching in the summer. And if you want a summer job, come on down. And so I did that for a while. But then I decided I wanted to do something different. I always liked to do something different. Probably the title of this thing, instead of being hard work never hurt anyone, should be "This Guy Can't Keep a Job," because it seemed like I did move around quite a bit. But I loved learning and still do. So I had a college professor at Johnson State. And it's kind of funny. Sometimes when you first meet people, your first impression is, "Oh, he's a great guy," or "I'm not too excited about him." Well, I was a math person, but I was a history person, and I wasn't a science person when it comes to botany. And I took botany, zoology, physiology, a lot of that stuff. Didn't really appeal to me, but had to take some courses in science. But I loved the math and I loved the physics. And so I took a physical, after having a year of biology and zoology, whatever, took physical science from him, and I loved it. I loved it. It was one of the best courses I had, and I did well. And I got to respect the man and like him. And one day he said to me, "What are you doing in the summer?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure." I said, "I've been working in the cheese factory, but I've done carpentry." And he says, "Well, I am on a board and stove that does town and village recreation. And the fellow who's been doing it for the last 2 or 3 years is graduating from college, or has graduated actually from college, and he's told us he's not coming back. He's taught this year and he's not going to come back. So why don't you, if you're interested, fill out this paper and give it back to me. So I did, and I got an interview and I got the job. And I have to admit that I didn't know a lot about what recreation was. I'd played basketball a little bit. I was terrible. I played baseball and I was okay, but not great. I played a little tennis, played a little golf. We had built a golf course, 3-hole golf course at the farm. Well, they sent me to training. I went to a week's training, and it was a fantastic job. Fantastic job. No 19, 20-year-old should have it that good. Had charge accounts at a number of stores, at the ice cream shop, and had a budget, and could give the students rewards and awards and do special events. Had a couple of people that worked under my direction doing arts and crafts and different activities, and I pretty much oversaw the whole program and did sports. Life sometimes is fair and sometimes it's not fair, but this time it was fair. I met one of the neighbor ladies to the school in Stowe, lived next door, and she used to come over and say, I remember she first time said, I see you coming early in the morning, if you ever want a cup of coffee, come on over. Well, I told her, I said, I don't drink coffee, but if I have time some morning, I might just come over and chat with you and find out what you're hearing about the program. Well, we became good friends, and she would come over, and sometimes she'd say, my husband's read the newspaper. If you want the newspaper, here it is. And so I'd throw it in the car and sometimes read it at lunchtime, take it home. What I didn't realize is she had a daughter, and the daughter was in high school, but she'd gone away for the summer, my first year. In the second year, when I came back, excuse me while I get a little drink here. It's dry in here, it's dry in my house, so I'm losing my voice. But so I met the daughter, very nice person. Like a lot of teenage people, she had her own ideas of how the recreation program should be run, and it wasn't the way it used to be. Well, didn't make any difference. Used to be, had gone. Well, got to know them, and over the years did things with the family and a group of her high school friends in college, and some college students, and ended up, I guess maybe 5, 6 years after that, we got married. When I was talking with Susan about this, I said, I've had a lot of fun, a lot of good luck, and a lot of good jobs, but I still like the theme hard work. And she said, what was one of the hardest things you had? I said, being a husband, being a father. That's 24/7. So anyway, after doing Stowe recreation and graduating, I decided it was maybe time to get a permanent job, and I started teaching. And I taught in a little town of Eden, Vermont, and I was the first male teacher there, which proved quite interesting. I think every lady there was probably as old as my mother. I don't know, some of them may have been as old as my grandmother, but they were nice. And they took me under their wing, and they told me what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. I didn't always agree with them, but I was there to do my job, and I made some good friends. During that time in teaching, I used to go back to the college. Susan was there as a student, and I was talking with some of my former professors, and they said, do you like teaching? I said, I like it. Yeah, I do. I like the children. I like to encourage students to try things, and some of them I know are challenged maybe with their studies, but they're great kids, and I think there's a future for them. And so a couple of the professors, one time I was there, they were standing in the hallway, and they stopped me and they said, if you really like education, then you need to continue. So they convinced me to continue, and another fairly long story that I won't tell you, ended up at the University of Maine, graduate school and got a master's there, and really, really enjoyed my graduate work. A challenge I had there my summer there, I was a dorm counselor, and my students were all Vietnam veterans. They'd come back from Vietnam, and they had the GI Bill, and they came. So I think I had maybe a dozen, 15, and I say they were all Vietnam veterans. That's not quite true. There were a few boys from the county, Aroostook County, that came down, but they were all great. We had a ball team. We had a really great time, but that was a challenge because these men had seen a lot that I'd never seen, and they weren't your typical college student. They were there to be serious and work, but if you want to say they studied hard, they did, but they played hard too, and sometimes way into the night when other people wanted to take and sleep. I finished my time there, went back, and they were opening Lemoyle Union High School, and I had taught in Eden, and Eden was part of that school district, and I got a job there, and I loved it. I was there 9 years, and in 9 years I went from one job to another, to another, to another, and I was assistant principal in charge of curriculum and guidance, a few other things. Sometimes you make decisions in life and you say, I'm really glad I made that. And other times you make decisions, you go, oh, I don't know. Probably 2 or 3 years after I decided to leave the high school, I was offered the high school principalship there. The principal had some health issues, and the superintendent came to me and said, if you want to come back to Lemoyle, I'll take you to the board and recommend you be the principal. I weighed it. It was probably one of the toughest decisions I have had to make, but I'd also been given an offer to go to the Virgins area. And even though my family cooperated, I think they were hesitant. My younger daughter said, if they have a kindergarten, Dad, I want to go. She was ready for kindergarten when she was about 2 years old. But anyway, we went, and everybody buckled down and made the best of it. And if you asked either daughter or Susan right now, they would say those are some of the best years of our lives. It gave us an opportunity to build a family in a different part of the state where we had to make new friends, join a new church, and do stuff. My daughter Stephanie, when she graduated from Trinity College, got a teaching job there, had a lot of support and encouragement. Susan got her first teaching job in Addison, Vermont, so it was good for her. So anyway, we stayed in Virgins. I was principal in Ferrisburg for 4 years, and then one of my friends called me up and said, hey, I know you've talked at times about being a superintendent. Well, let me tell you, there's an assistant superintendent job down in southeastern Vermont, and I know the fellow, and I'd like to call him up and tell him he should hire you. I said, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I interviewed and got the job, and we moved. And that's another whole story. That story would go on for 20 minutes, but the bottom line was we couldn't find a rent. And a young fellow who was a beginning realtor said, I know a family who has a place for rent. It's on the lake, and they're going to be going away for a year because the husband's got some big business commitment in, I think, Hong Kong. So I said to the family, let's go and meet him. Well, we met him, and oh my goodness, what a beautiful home. Every bedroom had a bathroom. I mean, it's right on the lake. And we lived there for a year, and it was fantastic. We laugh about that. But left there because I had heard when we came up north for Christmas that what I thought was one of the best superintendent jobs in the state of Vermont. And the reason I thought that was you had only 2 school buildings. Where I was in the south, we had 9 schools. When I was at Lemoyle, we had Belvedere, Waterville, Cambridge, Johnson, Hyde Park, all those different towns. And so to have just one school in Fairfax and one school in Georgia seemed like a wonderful opportunity to make some differences. And so I applied, and man, different than today where you get 2 or 3 candidates. There must have been 15, 20 of them. But I went out. I don't know if it was my work ethic or just pure luck, but I spent 14 years in Fairfax in Georgia as superintendent. And as I look back on it, I think that I enjoyed it. It was hard work. It was hard work in that even though their towns are alike, they are different. They had different expectations. And I will say this, that Fairfax having a K-12, well, it wasn't K-12 when I went there. It was 1 through 12, is different than having just elementary, junior high students. But it worked, and we moved the office from St. Albans the first year, where I didn't even have a school, but I had an office there. And then we had an office, and I remember going in on a weekend and working with a woman who was wallpapering the old house that became our office, and then we moved again later on. But it was 14 good years, and I was ready, as much as I enjoyed it, I was ready to do something different. I think some of my biggest accomplishments was we really looked at the curriculum. We got computers. I had taught a computer course when I was down in Brattleboro area, and I thought computers had a real future for students. Now, this is 1983, 84. Some people thought they were toys, and some people thought I was crazy asking for money. But we hired a computer person, and I think it was one of the best things we did at that time. The other thing is the art program in the schools was non-existent except for volunteers. And when I left there, I think we had 4 art teachers in the district. We also installed kindergarten, got the voters to support kindergarten. And later on, we even had pre-K before I left. So those are some of the things we did. One of the things I really liked was that, again, this is kind of a chance thing, but Blue Cross Blue Shield had put out a notice in the early 90s, I believe, that they would give incentives to school districts if you would do wellness programs, promote activities, non-smoking, and all the promote healthy activities. We would get rebates on our insurance. I think every school district had that chance. So we started doing it, and man, some years we got thousands and thousands of dollars back to the school on health insurance premiums because we were real healthy, and people would kind of say to other people, hey, why don't you give up smoking? And it was good. It was really good. I did remember a couple of years we have a person who was very ill, and of course that impacted your reimbursement because the reimbursement was shared with teachers too. So it was a good incentive program. But out of that, I've been a runner, I've been a walker, not a walker, I should say. I've been a runner, but appreciated walkers. And we started a walking program and had a group of people, and they really did it. It was them. It was somebody's idea other than mine, but as a superintendent, I supported it. And when they decided that it had caught hold and done all it could, I picked it up. And we started something called Footsteps for Fitness. I think a couple of people worked with me. And at one point, we had over 2,000 students in the state of Vermont, and I think we had some in New York State, that did Footsteps for Fitness. We had T-shirts, we had hats. I eventually got some sponsors from local banks, so we didn't use school budget money for that. And it was quite a program. Ended up on a little clip on Good Morning America. I personally, after everybody left that program and I had retired, I kept the idea. And I was on NBC Channel 5, did some activities with some of the people there, and schools in New York State, did schools throughout the state of Vermont. Today it would be easy with emails and everything. I used to have to use postcards, Footsteps for postcards. During these times at Lamoille and Vergennes and then in Georgia and Fairfax, I dabbled a little bit in antiques. And really kind of liked it. In fact, many of the things that I grew up with, by the time I got to being a superintendent, they were considered antiques. But it took me back to a time, and again, it wasn't Don Collins, but I was involved. I had an uncle who really was into it. He loved to go on old farms and get stuff and go to households and auctions. And the guy got me interested in it and took me back to the days when I was doing Christmas trees. And we used to go to farmers and there'd be scrap metal around. And I'd ask the farmer what he was going to do with it. And he'd say, hey, kid, if you want it, come and get it. And so I had a pretty good little scrap metal business when I was in high school, but going back to the later years, my uncle was convinced that there was more money in auctions than there was buying and selling, and he talked to a couple auctioneers, and they came and looked at his stuff and said, "No, you got a bunch of junk. There's no money there." So I remember saying to him, "Uncle Matt, you know, I'm an auctioneer, or I can be an auctioneer." And he kind of looked at me like, "Yeah, you can do everything." But I told him when we had church auctions when I was in high school, the old gentleman that did them used to say to us high school kids at work, "If you wanted to try a little auctioneering, come on up." And usually be near the end of the auction, there'd be pure junk that you couldn't get $1 for. But I liked it. I tried it. So and I went and got some training, and I was an auctioneer for my uncle. And a couple of people that were at my first auction, came and said, "Hey, this is pretty entertaining." I think it was maybe more entertaining than it was money making, although people later said we made good money because we treated the crowd with respect. You never yell at your crowd that they're cheap. You tell them they're good and that they're helping you, and maybe it could help you a little more. So that took me to the point where it was time to retire from full-time work. I could have stayed on. I probably could have worked as a superintendent another 5 or 10 years, but I said, no, I want to do something different. One of the things that I had done as a superintendent was two major construction projects in Fairfax. Now, I didn't do them. We hired contractors, we hired engineers, architects, but I had total oversight. And I had a good school board, and I could go to some of my school board members. I remember Jimmy Meanier in Fairfax, very, very knowledgeable. I had other people. So once I had retired and was doing just some projects with our household and with my dad on some property we owned, I got a call, and it was from some people at Essex High School, and the business manager called and said, "I know from visiting Fairfax in Georgia," I think they came up there to Georgia to recruit students, "that you've done one whale of a job on overseeing construction. And you've got some nice schools with creative designs and really, really good. We'd like to talk to you about coming down to Essex. We are rebuilding the high school, remodeling high school, putting in a new library and a few other things. And we think you'd be a good owner's representative." The business manager said he could do some of it with the money, and the head of maintenance could do some of it with maintenance, but that shouldn't be their job. They should have somebody who really could devote time to it. So I took the job, and interestingly enough, the principal there had been one of the teachers that I'd had in Georgia. So that was quite interesting to work with him, and we pulled off some very good things and solved some problems that I think the architect may have created, but anyway, we got it done. Pretty much near the end of that, I'd say maybe we're in the last 2 or 3 months, I received a message, and the message always had to come pretty much with household phones because cell phones were still not that big and utilized, but wanted me to stop by the office. So thinking about what had been happening, some challenges that we'd had, I figured somebody was unhappy. But I went in with a positive attitude and said, "Hey, what's up?" And one of the fellows said, "You may not realize this, but in Essex, the school department also oversees the recreation department. They have a budget within our school budget, and the voters have voted to build a new rec hall, with an indoor swimming pool, 2 or 3 outdoor swimming pools. There was an adult pool, a kiddies pool, and there may have been a lane pool, but I'm not sure, but at least 2. And we would like to have you manage that when you get done here and wrap this up." And I said to him, "I know nothing about swimming pools except they should hold water." And they laughed and said, "Doesn't make any difference. We've seen that you hold people accountable, and the job gets done the way it's supposed to be done according to the specs, and we think you can do it. And I'm going to tell you, when you want to talk about hard work, you want to work with 2 architectural firms, one from Vermont, one from Boston. Boston firm had never done a job north of northern Massachusetts, maybe southern New Hampshire. And they wanted to build a fancy roof over the swimming indoor pool with all kinds of copper gullies and all kinds of fancy scroll work and everything. And finally convinced them that maybe that wasn't quite the right thing for northern Vermont, but it was fun. But you think about hard work, that for sure was hard work. That started me on another whole career. But from the time I left the high school and went to the recreation, word got out, and I was doing jobs. Jobs consulting in Addison County on small jobs, a few other ones in Franklin County, where people call me. They were jobs where you started and then it came to an end, and then they decided what they wanted to do, if anything. I ended up in Lamoille, really fine. I went back, got there in I got there in 67, went back, around 2000, maybe a little before. Rebuilt the school, the high school that I had worked hard in, new science labs, all kinds of stuff, and put in a new middle school. And that was really a wonderful job. It was fun. It was a lot of long hours, a lot of challenging meetings, but people worked together and we did that. I also was there when they started redesigning the career center that I had worked in when it was a vocational center. Also along that same time, Johnson State College, I had done some work for the college in the summers. I taught a few courses on student achievement through reading and writing. And so they asked me if I would like to teach in the summer, and I did. And so once I retired, I taught at Johnson State, graduate and undergraduate courses, and I also supervised student teachers. Did quite a few little different education consulting jobs. Ended up doing one job that I guess I'm going to call volunteer, but I note it because it was probably one of the most fun things I've ever done. I had been active as a superintendent in seeing what we could do to make every child a reader. Wasn't successful, I'm sure, but tried a lot of things to make sure to develop a love of reading. I'd always believed, and I think this came from my mother, that if you could read, you could do anything. My mother used to read to me, the librarian in the village. I remember Ola, lady there, and would read to me if I'd go into the library, pick out books and tell me I'd like that one. Sometimes I didn't think I liked it, but she said I liked it. I'm sure I'm going to like it. So I got a call from the Vermont Expos. I think the gentleman that was heading it up right then, Kyle, I think he's a St. Albans boy, St. Albans man. And I ended up meeting with the Expos, and what they said was, we would like to encourage to read, students to read, children to read, and we'd like to reward them by giving them a ticket to the ball game. Hey, great idea, right? No. It's a good idea, but it's not a great idea. In fact, I'm not even sure it's a good idea. And I think I kind of put them back on their heels because it was like, hey, we want to give something away. So I said to them, they said, would you be interested in working with us? As I say, I think I got maybe free tickets to games. I said, sure. So Susan had been a reading teacher, so I said, if I'm going to do this, you're going to be in it too, please. And she said, yeah, I'll do it with you. So I said to the Expos, if we're going to do this, every child that reads the number of books that we decide is appropriate in the summer reading program, they'll have to send a form to my house. That was a challenge. Some days we'd get 30, 40 forms. And you're going to give the family at least 2 tickets. And they go, we're willing to give a ticket. I said, no, a ticket has no value to a child. I said, I'm thinking of the children I've had in school. An 8-year-old gets a ticket to go to an Expo game. How are they going to get there? parents, neighbors. No, if you can't give an adult ticket with a child ticket, then I'm not interested in doing it. So they didn't think very long about it. They decided that that probably was a good idea. And then I kind of pushed them at times and said, hey, I know this family, or I don't know this family well, but when I saw the child, little boy is 9 years old, and a 7-year-old sister, she's reading too. I want them to get 2 tickets. And the Expos never said no to me. I don't know how long it continued, but did it for quite a few years, and it may still be going on. So that was kind of a fun thing that went to work. So anyway, I think I'm probably pretty close to wrapping up here. Right now, I pretty much work in my antique shop. I'm on the school board. In fact, I'm up for re-election. I've been there 20 years. But some of the other things that I've done over the years, I mentioned the auctioneer. I was a lay minister. There again, I remember meeting in the summer with young ministers that came to our town and loved it, go to summer activities. And then we got this elderly lady minister, and I knew right off that I wasn't going to like her. She didn't seem to want to do much fun. She turned into one of the best ministers I ever knew. She required that if we were going to go to church and do youth group, we were going to have to take and help in church services. And with her encouragement, I got training, and I was a lay minister. They don't call them ministers now. They call them lay something else. But anyway, and I had a church in Westfield for a number of years. I had a church in North Hyde Park. And then I had a lot of these. I did Belvedere a few times in the summer. And I had these jobs where you'd go maybe once, twice, when they needed somebody because the minister was on vacation or ill, and kept busy with that. I think that some people say, do you ever have fun? I said, oh, yes, I used to bowl. I bowled in a bowling league for a number of years. I played in a golf league, but I find my activities in my school, like school board activities, are just as much fun, no, more fun than playing golf or fishing or hunting, which I've also done, and bowling. And once in a while, I'll pick out my golf clubs, but not too often. I think the message I'd want to leave with people is it's not only isn't hard work going to kill you, it's going to help you, but commitment and not being afraid to try something and maybe be less successful than you want. I don't like the word failure, but I've had times when I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. I remember applying for jobs and was pretty much told, hey, you're our best candidate. I remember one time, and I didn't get the job, and there was a reason I didn't get the job, and it was beyond my control or the superintendent's control. But anyway, things worked out, and I think a year or two later I got a better job, one that I enjoyed much more than I would have the other. So now I think, as a school board member and as community members, I like to try to find ways to encourage young people to try it, take some risks, work hard or work. How hard work is depends, I guess, on your attitude. So maybe my dad, when he said hard work won't kill you, knew that maybe I wasn't working as hard as I could or I should, but at least he encouraged me. And like Charlie McCarthy said, I don't want to be the first casualty, but I made it this far and I'm not a casualty yet. So I continue with my antique business. I don't know if I mentioned in here, but at one point I even bought and ran a laundromat in Swanton. So done quite a few things, had quite a few careers, and hopefully my children and grandchildren will appreciate this and will laugh with it and ask me more questions. And some of the viewers, if they could stand with it for an hour, maybe they'll call up Josh and say, hey, I'd like to come in. I'd like to tell my story. In fact, my story is even better than that guy that was in there before. So hopefully people enjoyed it. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, people here at Swanton, Swanton, sure, St. Albans Public Access. One wonderful opportunity to ramble on about a life enjoyed, and I'm looking for another 10 years, so time will tell. Thank you very much, and I'm going to sign off now.